Hi guys, welcome back. Just watched a video from Tetsubo57 in which he does 50 firsts or 50 engaging questions on life experiences and first times. As I quite like doing these memes, I thought, hey, why not? Let's go for it. So, without further ado, what was your first car? I've only ever had one car, and that was an Eastern European thing called a Polonaise. Which was basically sat in my parents' garden at one point for probably about 6 months. I think I took it out once with my dad to go driving. Otherwise it just sat there and I'd use it every couple of days to turn the engine over. She was named Caitlin, but in the end, when I decided that driving was not for me, I ended up selling her for about £100, I think. Okay, question 2. Who was the first person you cared more about their well-being than your own? I don't know, to be honest. That's a good question, but off the top of my head, I can't think. I would probably pass. I don't know. It's not something that I can particularly say has ever really come up. Probably because I've not been in those sort of situations. Question 3. When was your first public speaking success? Probably the first and only time would have been probably at school, where you had to stand up and read something you'd written to the class. Because I've never really done public speaking, and I hope I never have to. Question 4. When was the first time you got stitches? I was about 4 or 5. And I was clambering over the garden gate, and I went head first over the other side and went smack on the concrete, and had to have a row of stitches across the top of my scalp, which probably goes some way to explaining why I'm not quite as clever a chap as I feel I should be. What's next? When was the first time you stayed up all night and watched the sunrise? I've never done it for that reason. I have often sat up all night and occasionally gone out in the early hours, but it's never been to actually watch the sunrise. So. What was the first thing you learned to cook? Pot noodle. I can't cook. I'm terrible at it. Everything I do is pretty much something that can be just put on a tray and put into the oven. I'm not a cook. I can't stand it, to be honest. What was your first paying job? I'm actually going to say that was when I was, well, some people might disagree, but I did, when I left school, what used to be called the YTS, or Youth Training Scheme, which basically was one of these things that got young people and youth offenders into the workplace and trained them, got them some skills, and so you would be paid by them rather than the actual placement you went to. And that was something really pathetic, like about £30 a week. But, you know, at the time I was at a place called, what used to be called United News. I don't know whether the company still stands. It was a huge sort of like UK chain of news agents and things like that. What was next? When was the first time you flew on an airplane? I've never flown on an airplane. I've walked on an airplane. I've been on Concorde at Duxford War Museum when I was very ill, but I've never actually flown in a plane at this particular point in time. What was the first concert you went to see? I went in about 1980, it was either 88 or 89. I went to the London Astoria to see a Canadian thrash metal band called Annihilator. Best concert I've ever been to. No concert since then has ever lived up to that one. It was just awesome. Where are we? What's next? What was your first bike like? First bike. I had what was called a chopper when I was very ill, and I can't remember the colour. I want to say blue, but I'm probably remembering it wrong. I don't actually think I had it for long, because for most of my probably later childhood and teens I didn't actually own a bike, so I don't ever know what happened to it. When was the first time you shot a gun? The only firearms I've ever fired are paintball guns and BB guns, and I hope I never actually fire a real gun. When was the first time you moved houses? Well, I know we moved house at least once when I was very young, and I don't remember that. So the first time I can actually remember moving house, I was 9, I think, or I was just about to turn 9. We moved a couple of streets away because my parents were getting fed up with the neighbours. Don't know what they'd done, but I remember that. When was the first time you threw a punch? I would have been in high school, and there was some kid who I barely knew, who for a couple of weeks, for some strange reason, would just follow me around, shouting out "Care Bear Colin, Care Bear Colin." And one day I just lost it with him during one lunch break, and I just belted him one. He never did it again. I don't think I ever saw him again after that either. So, but I've never thrown a punch since. When was the first time you quit a job? We're going back. What was it now? I was late 20s, and I was a carer for my parents. I'd not long just started it, and I used to help out at a computer game / role-play game sort of store, primarily computer games. But the guy who ran it had been running it for a number of years. I'd known him for most of that, and he basically asked me to help out. And much like when I was helping out at the game store, I basically got to buy stuff on the cheap rather than him actually pay me. But I ended up quitting that because he ended up taking the piss a little bit. He'd go away for a weekend, and a huge delivery would turn up, and there would just be a note saying you've got to put it away. When there was never any room to put anything away, and he probably all knew it. And I lost my rag after a couple of times of this happening, and I basically said, well, sod it. Stayed good friends with him, but I've never felt that annoyed at something before to the point where I've had to quit. So, what was your first professional sporting event you went to? I've never been to a professional sporting event. Sports interest me zippo. Couldn't care less about them. When was the first time you realised you are good at your job? To be honest, I don't think I'm good at any job. I'm one of those people who the whole nature of turning up, doing the job, going home, and you just get on with it really just doesn't appeal to me. I like something where I can have a bit more input. So I've never had a job where I felt that, and thus far never felt good at anything work related. When was your first regrettable hairstyle? That would have probably been in about 1987 or 8, when a friend of a friend who was joined the Air Training Corps, I think that's what it's called, ATC, basically convinced me to try and join it, which I didn't do, but I did end up going and getting a complete grade 1 shave, almost bald head, and I hated that. What was your first business venture? Never done one. I would like to open my own game store. I think I would be fairly good at it, but I don't have the capital for it. So, how old were you when you first left home? I would have been, let me see, probably about 23. My folks are great, but they are a little bit weird. And at the time, Mum had got some chaffinches, which sat in this really nice, big, fairly ornamental sort of cage on the windowsill. And she named them all after characters from Star Trek Deep Space Nine and insisted that they talk. Were they cheap, she could make out words to it, and I just went, yeah, I've had enough. So that's when I left home. When you the first time you cut class, how old were you the first time you cut class? I would have probably been 15, probably the 4th year of high school. And there were just a couple of classes I had no interest in, so a friend of mine would just routinely disappear from them. Did get caught once, and got a telling off and basically given a report card, which none of the teachers were actually interested in, so actually made no punishment whatsoever. How old were you when you had your first kiss? I would say I was about 5. And the young girl in question lived on my street. She was about my age as well, just before anyone worries. How old were you? Sorry, when was your first time you went fishing? I've never been fishing. The whole concept of fishing bores me senseless. I think people that actually enjoy fishing are slightly weird, to be honest. How old were you when you got your first computer? Technically, I was 9 because I was bought a ZX81 Spectrum with 1K of memory. Not really sure that you could call that a computer, but the first proper PC, I was probably, that would have been about 92, so I would have been 18 or 19. Right, where were we? When was the first time you stood up for yourself? That would also have been at school. It was a situation where someone who I thought was a friend tried to get me in trouble, and for some strange reason, despite me having witnesses and people to back me up, I got in trouble for it, and I really stood up for myself again. I didn't get anywhere, but wasn't going to take that line down. What was the first big ticket item you purchased? I have no idea what that means. What is a big ticket item? I'm assuming that must mean something like an expensive piece of kit. That would have probably been my second PC, if that's the case. I can't remember now how much they cost, how much it cost, but that would have been the first expensive thing that I bought. Where are we? What was the first book that made you cry? A book has never made me cry. Books don't make me cry. TV and movies make me cry, but not books. Where was your first road trip? That was to Leeds in about 93 to visit my friend Chris. He was at university in Leeds, and we went up for a week. Why did you break up with your first boyfriend, girlfriend? Depends on you class it. I class it, but that was the young girl I mentioned a few moments ago about the first kiss. We were both about 5. We both insisted we were dating and we were going to get married and kids and everything else, and we broke up because I ended up moving about 3 streets away, and she went to a different school than I did in the end, so we never saw each other after that. What was the first thing you ever won? Probably sweets when I was in infant school, I don't know. As an adult, pass. Probably something from a raffle or a tombola or something like that. Where are you? Who was your first best friend? That's a good question. I would probably say, thinking about it, when I was a young'un, I lived next door to a lad who was several years older than me. He was at kind of like high school level, and his name was, never remember, Andrew Gosnell, and he was a huge footy fan, and it's because of him, although I don't particularly follow football at all, it's because of him that I actually support Queen's Park Rangers, because we were playing football one day out in the street. He said he was going to be Spurs and I could be QPR, and it's stuck ever since. No idea whatever happened to him. When was the first time you let a friend down? I really try not to, because friendship means a lot to me. I can't think. There must have been instances in the 90s, but I can't think of them. The earliest one I can think of going back was probably when my mate JP was moving, and I'd said I would come by in the morning and help him move, and I overslept and missed most of it. Sorry. Right, what's next? Where are we? Do you believe in love at first sight? I want to say yes, but I also think you need to know someone before you can get those sort of feelings. You can get probably lust at first sight, and you can get a hint of interest, but I don't think that you can actually get love at first sight. When was the first Christmas you realised Santa Claus was not real? Probably I was 5 or 6. I don't really remember. was I just kind of remembering up to a point yes, and after a point no. So, when was your first trip to Las Vegas? I've never been to Las Vegas. In fact, the idea doesn't appeal to me at all. It's just one of those places that I just think is a bit tacky, and you just go there to waste a load of money. So, when was the first time people looked at you in a crisis? I don't think anybody ever has. I've never been in that sort of crisis. So, when was the first time you realised that you were smarter than your parents? I was about 12. My parents are great, but they're not the sharpest people in the world, to be fair. Who was your first sweetheart that you took home to meet your parents? Again, we're going back to this young lady when I was about 5. Her name was Emma Hammond. But there you go. Who was your first love? Well, sorry about my phone there. Who was my first love? That would probably be her. I remember actually, as a kid, I mean, you are a kid, so these things aren't particularly serious, but I do remember actually really feeling that I loved her. But there you go. When was the first time you realised that you were way in over your head? Basically, when I turned about 30. I was one of those people who, when I got to 30, that was it. My life was over. I was an old man. And it was a really upsetting day for me, but everything kind of piled in on me after that, and I've kind of felt that the way I want to live my life, you're not allowed to. Basically, society doesn't like it, and I've often felt that I need to, sort my life out, and but it's just not easy. What was your first phone number? I don't remember. We got a phone in about 1987, and I genuinely can't remember. I used to know it by rote, because you used to answer the phone back then with, dum 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 dum, and no, can't remember it. What was your first time in hospital? That would have been the falling off of the gate and smacking my head open. When was the first time you finished something really big? Well, I don't quite know what that means. I've never, if you're on about something along the lines of building your own car or building your own house or something like that, I've never have done. I don't think those are exaggerations, admittedly. I've never really started anything along those sort of lines. When was the first time you took responsibility for someone else's mistake? I never have done, at least not that I can remember. You make a mistake, you own up to it, and you deal with it yourself. You take the consequences. When was the first time you saw the ocean? I don't know. I would have probably been about 4 or 5. My parents used to love going to a place called Hunstanton, as a kid. So I imagine it must have been around about then. How old were you when you first drank alcohol? I was about 14 or 15. My parents were a little old. They wouldn't let me watch certain TV programmes, or sometimes you wouldn't be allowed to go out and play with your friends. And when I hit my teens, they were still a little restrictive on places, but for some strange reason, when it came to my birthdays, we'd get trays of beer bought cheap from a cash and carry. And on occasion, Mum and Dad would just go out and they'd buy some beer whenever I had friends over. It's a bit odd. Who was the first person you had a crush on? That would have been Miss Smith, who was an English teacher I had in high school for 2 years. And I did actually end up buying her some chocolates. And then at the end of 1 year, only to find that she had fallen pregnant in the interim and had left on maternity leave. So, who was the first person you voted for? Not voted for a person. When I turned 18, the first time I voted in a general election, it was for the Liberal Democrats. They were called the LSDP or something like that at the time, and and they did a meeting at my what had been my high school, and myself and a friend went along to it, And in your naive sort of state at that particular point, you turn and go, yes, this makes sense, I shall vote for these people. And, I wouldn't vote for them again. What was your first email address? It was something like samedy_elder@hotmail.com. It was based off of Samedy being a bloodline for the Vampire Masquerade roleplay game, and I used to really like them. Haven't used that address in 12 years, 15 years? No, about 12 years. Don't even know if it still exists. It's probably been deleted by now. What was your first slow dance like? It was awkward. It was at a friend's birthday party, I believe, and she couldn't dance and neither could I, so it was just very, very treading on each other's toes and things like that. Who was the first person to have a crush on you? I don't know. Sadly, I don't know if anyone ever has, and if they do, please tell me. What do you remember about your first day of school? Very, very little. All I remember actually is coming home and Mum saying, right, take your clothes off because you're going to need them tomorrow, and me going, what, I've got to go back? Other than that, I don't remember it at all. When was the first time someone close to you died? I was 9 or 10, and it was my granddad. He'd lived with us for about 3 or 4 years, and unfortunately he died from, if I remember correctly, it was water on the brain, something like that. My grand lasted another 10 years. But that was the first time. I was never especially close to him, though. I used to spend a lot of time sitting there talking to him, playing dominoes. He taught me to play pontoon, and used to listen to his stories from when he was in the Great War. But I have to say, when he died, it was a loss, but I never cried or anything like that about it. I just never felt that close to him. But, that's my 50 questions. I hope they're interesting in some way or other, but thank you to Tetsubo for posting them, and take care and see everybody later. Bye.